Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our Big Book 12-Step Workshop. Please join me in prayer, a petition for spiritual intervention, an open mind and open heart. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps in you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, we're finally at the place where we're moving on. Today is the final formal discussion about step one. We've been at it for several weeks, maybe several months, actually, step one. And I spend that much time on it because it's foundational, literally providing the foundation to a spiritual structure that Bill acknowledges in the second step. He said the willingness on page 47, the willingness to pursue a concept other than ourselves. Just the willingness alone, he says, is the cornerstone of an arch through which we'll walk to a new freedom. We're not at the second step. We're completing the building of the foundation for that arch. Now, he never says it that clearly, but he uses this architectural analogy in step two, the cornerstone, which assumes that it's placed on something. And the nature of a cornerstone is it sets the direction of the structure. The next time we hear about that spiritual structure is in step three, when he refers to step three as the arch in the spiritual structure. That's the keystone, the stone that is at the pinnacle, the top of the spiritual arch through which we walk to a new freedom. That keystone. It holds the entire spiritual structure together, step three. That's his implication. The next time we hear about it is at the end of step five, when he says, now you've completed your journey through the arch in step five. Those are the only three references I'm aware of that he makes to this arch. The point here is, at the conclusion of step one, that it's the foundation. It's an assumption on my part. And we've taken a deep look at what's wrong with my body, what's wrong with my mind, as Bill indicated on page 44. And we did look at that because that's the way Bill ends his discussion on step one. On page 43, concluding from the doctor's opinion that once we start, we cannot stop. And from his own experience, once we start, we cannot stay stopped, as he describes and defines insanity, the problem of the mind, vulnerable to the obsession and the delusion. And he concludes on page 43, There'll come a time when we have no effective mental defense. From his standpoint, he's completed his discussion of step 1 in the formal structure of the writing of the big book, because he goes right then into chapter 4, We Agnostics, which is all about step 2. So he thinks he's concluded step 1, but I don't, not now on my experience. Fortunately, Bill even acknowledged in some of his writings, we know only a little. More will be revealed. And in my 10th year of sobriety and my 3rd journey through the steps, the man gave me the set-aside prayer and then introduced me to unmanageability as we've seen it. The behavioral description of unmanageability on page 52, those bedevilments. Powerless, no choice over my willpower. A whole new concept that he introduced on page 45. Lack of power is my dilemma. And then on pages 60 to 62, in the next chapter, we did skip around. We looked at some pieces from chapter 4 and some pieces from chapter 5. It clearly wasn't Bill's intention to combine it the way we're combining it. And yet, from my knowledge now and my experience, it makes absolutely wonderful sense, not only logical, but organically. It describes the full human being, addressing addiction in the first half of the first step, but addressing humanity in the second half of the first step. 1 out of 10, 5 out of 10 are addicts in the world. Maybe a bit more percentage, but it's not 100%. Not everybody's addicted, but everybody's human by definition. We have a mind that thinks reflectively, and we have a will that decides freely, voluntarily. And the will is the problem. Bill says it. It's the unmanageability, the source. It's the spiritual malady, the synonym. Self-will run riot, that's humanity. The extreme example of self-will run riot, which is what he uses in the big book, that's the addict that's also human. The addiction may be the reason for adding extreme example. And at the end of that second paragraph on page 62, he concludes it in the same way that he concluded page 43. The first half of the first step was concluded that we have no effective mental defense. On page 62, the last sentence in that second paragraph concludes, about willpower and self-centeredness, we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. Wow, I had never seen it. I wasn't able to see it in reviewing those 2 paragraphs. I was able to see it in the bedevilments, applying them to my life at 10 years of sobriety. They weren't 100%. They certainly weren't as gross as they were prior to coming in the program. They clearly weren't as gross as they were after I had done the steps once or twice. But they were still mostly relevant so that I could see that I hadn't seen before. I did what I didn't want to do, 10 years sober, and I didn't do what I wanted to do, 10 years sober, having 2 previous spiritual awakenings. Now, some of us will have a deeper experience with step 1 when we get to step 4. One of my good friends said that step 4, inventory, is actually step 1 in writing. It's a brilliant insight. As we see the underlying causes and conditions and the exact nature of our instincts gone awry, we really understand unmanageability at a technicolor level. But that's for a later experience. And so I had you take a look at the will worksheet, which is really taking a look at those bedevilments and some other questions that are just pulled into a full sentence. Each one of those bedevilments giving its own full sentence for a question. Not for you to pass a test, but for you to have an experience. The purpose of all of the worksheets. There's no right or wrong. There's just your approach and your consciousness and your insight coming from it, giving you an experience. And the final question, to really sort of cap it, is to go back to page 60 and turn that statement into a question. The statement on page 60. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And I asked you to ask yourself now at the completion of all of the assignments on step 1, I hope you've done all of that, reading and reflecting and listening and writing. And then turn that statement into a question. Am I now convinced that my life run on self-will has not and cannot be successful? I do not have effective, sufficient willpower to manage my life, to be happy, to be content, to be in alignment even with my perception of reality, let alone reality as it is. Huge distinction. More about that later. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Next week, we'll begin unpacking step 2. We'll be looking at chapter 4. You're welcome to read what we've already read. The assignment number 6 begins by having you look up a couple words. I don't need you to look up all of the words, just 2. Assignment 6, the 2 words I'd like you to look up and write out a definition are belief and faith. It might be interesting for you to even write out what you think about those words mean and then go to the dictionary, but that's not part of the assignment. That just came to me. That's the way I did it. And then the item number 2, ask yourself, what do I actually believe about God? Now, none of you, I believe, unless you've been with me before, really heard the question I just asked, even though it was a simple question. So now I'm going to unpack. What do I mean by, what do you actually believe? I mean, what do you actually believe? Not know, not think, not feel, not read, not had instructions from your sponsor or your minister or your rabbi or your priest, not from your parents, not from your school, not from your community, not from your religious tradition. That's all interesting. It's just irrelevant to this question. I mean, irrelevant to this question. What you know and think and feel and read have been told. Irrelevant to this question. The question is, please hear it. That's why I have you look up the word in a dictionary, belief. What do you actually believe about God, higher power? It's not a test. It's an opportunity, an invitation for you to reflect on, sitting here and between now and next Thursday, writing down. Please write it down. Don't just leave it circling in your head. Write it down, 1 sentence or 1 paragraph or 1 page. It doesn't make any difference. Some of you write more succinctly than others. Others have more elaborate reflections, and it's just fine. but write it down, what it is you believe. Actually, not what you want to believe, not what you think you believe, but what you actually believe. Actually is the key here. Then number 3, obviously read and highlight chapter 4. Once you've done these in the sequence that I've just articulated them from the assignment, do them in the order. It's very tactical. The instructions and assignments have been fine-tuned every year to make them more precise, more specific, more based on sort of an organic development. So that's why I'm suggesting that you do them in order. I'm not sure I was ever that clear about it before, but it's such an important process, steps 2 and 3, that I wanted to make that very clear. So if you have any questions about the assignment, please, that's obviously questions that I encourage you to ask. But I don't want to have a discussion about step 2. I don't want to have a discussion about your response to that question. That's not the point. Those are the assignments for next week. I want to have a discussion and stay focused on unmanageability, the spiritual malady, the assignment 5. But I'm really setting some boundaries here for our discussion today. I would rather, I don't have any rules, but I would rather avoid discussion about addiction. I want you to talk about, think about, discuss unmanageability, assuming that you have 1 day of abstinence or more. And even if you don't have a day of abstinence, if you can remember a time when you did have some abstinence, what was your life like in terms of manageability?
I know my life is unmanageable. I mean, in different parts.
How do you know that? No, how do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yeah.
By the way that the obsessive thoughts take over my head, and I twirl and I swirl and I get crazy and I worry and I panic and I different things.
You convinced me.
That's my reaction to things.
No. You know what? That's a wonderful way to phrase it. Because of my reaction to things. I love that. That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that the only way to solve that is to hand whatever the issue is over to my higher power and to walk away from it and look to him for direction. I have 7 years and have over the past probably 3 years really learned to practice that and appreciate it, and it's such a blessing. But even with that being said, I still, even this past week, discovered something else that I'm in constant or I attempt to be in constant control of, and I need to let go of, and I had never thought of it before. Mm-hmm. And because you're always growing, you're always learning, you're always having things brought to you. It's what happened this week was I have to take an online course, like a graduate level course, and I just panicked because I don't have time, and I don't have a free evening, and when am I going to get this work done? And then I stopped after an hour or so, and I started to pray and think about it and take it to quiet time. And one of the things, it's really funny, but one of the things that happens around here at my house, I work, my husband does not. He manages our property and he has his own personal business that he does. And he has frequently in the past few weeks said to me, what is it that I can do? What can I do? And I always say nothing, because in my head is the thought that there's nothing you can do that I would ever meet my expectations. To be honest. Yeah. And I didn't realize that until I thought about it. Immediately my thought is, if I want you to mop the mudroom floor, then I have to take time to show you how to mop the mudroom floor to my standard. Or I would be interrupted at work by your text asking me, where's this, where's that, where's this, where's that? Or I would have to come home and do it again because it wouldn't be exactly right. And it just hit me like a brick that I just need to say, you know what, you could mop the mudroom floor and then walk away.
Yeah, lower your standards.
Right, let him do whatever. And I know that. That's the funny thing. Like my favorite saying is, expectations are just premeditated resentments.
Yeah.
And I'm always, got to keep that standard low, got to keep that bar low. But it just hit me that I can slip into that, and not realize it. So, yeah, my prayer the past 2 days has been, show me other areas that I need to let go of.
That's a very courageous prayer.
Well, and that's the point of all this, and not be the director and the actor. And that's really what brought it to my attention too, was that whole section, reading that again about the director and the actor, and make everybody do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
And so that's my realization this week.
Well, see, that's an experience that you're having that's creating more consciousness, and more consciousness is creating your experience. And that's the organic interplay that is the gift of this work.
Right.
Yeah, so wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I did the will worksheet, and the first question, am I having trouble with my personal relationships? And I said, yes, especially when I forget that I'm powerless over people. And, that's one of the ways that I know that my life is still unmanageable, because I still, am under the delusion sometimes that I have some kind of power and control. I forget that I don't.
Right.
I try to control people, places, and things. And as long as everyone's doing what I want them to do, as long as my life is running, the way that I think that it's supposed to, it's manageable. And I realized that it's better than it was when I got here, when I used the tools of the program. But when I don't use the tools of the program, I'm off the chain.
Right.
I'm just running around trying to do all of this stuff and not relying on God and using the tools. And I get wrapped around the axle.
Yeah. Right.
And I make myself crazy. Her.
Well, see, but see, that's such a mature insight. If you really meant what you just said, I make myself crazy. I didn't hear you blaming anybody or anything. You took responsibility. That's huge. That puts you in the upper 5% of consciousness in the world.
I owe it all to AA.
Isn't it the truth?
For it.
Yeah.
Because I love what you said about I am responsible for my thinking, my behavior, and my actions.
Yeah.
That's what AA has given me, that realization.
That's right.
That blame thing, because I have blamed people for so long. And just having that as a foundation. You were talking about a foundation. The first step of being a foundation.
Yes.
Was part of my foundation of not really taking, full responsibility for myself, for my actions, for my belief, for my feelings. I always thought that someone else caused it.
Yeah.
While things did happen to me as a child in my developmental years,
sure,
my parents were supposed to do and should have done,
yes,
do it. And, realizing that I'm not the victim, that I'm grown now. It's up to me to take responsibility and find my way. And finding my way is AA.
Yeah.
Because the tools of AA really give me a roadmap for life. It's just me using the tools.
Yeah.
That's the thing for me. And I really do forget sometimes that I'm powerless over people.
Yeah.
And I want them to do what I want them to do. And that's when I find myself getting in trouble, when I have these expectations of people.
Yeah.
When they don't meet them, I get resentful. Okay. Yeah. But I don't know that at the time. Okay. It's like, I know I have a resentment when I start wanting to punish people and fix, I'm going to get them back. And on my list, that's when I know that I have a resentment. But sometimes I don't really know I have a resentment up front. And I don't know that somebody has failed to meet some expectation I've developed in my head. I don't even know that I have the expectation really until, it goes on and I realize that I didn't, they shouldn't have said what they said to me. I expected them to behave differently. And so that's when it happens. And that's the kind of stuff that happens that helps me to see, the unmanageability, and that powerlessness is right there every step of the way with all of it.
Yeah.
I don't see it all the time right away. Sometimes it only comes to me in prayer meditation. And then sometimes it doesn't even come to me at my first attempt.
Yeah.
It might come like way down the road, a couple weeks later, the small voice will say, well, if you weren't trying to control that situation, that wouldn't have happened or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the psychologists I'm familiar with, he uses a wonderful phrase which captures what you were saying. He says, human beings have unenforceable rules.
I'm writing that down.
I hope so. Unenforceable rules. And it's kind of like, oh my God, it's the script that we have about life and about how they should operate and how life should be. And it's just a script that we made up. And we don't know that it's a myth. It's a story that isn't true. It's everything that you just said from just using different vocabulary. And that's what this work did for me when I was 4 years sober, going through the steps for the first time. I began to sense what you're saying and experience it, but it wasn't until I had gone through the steps the second and third time that I feel I had a full handle on it. So one wonderful insight. Thank you for sharing it with us.
I want to ask you something though, Herb, like, even though I know all of these things, it's like I know these things.
Yeah.
Intellectually, I know these things.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what you had said before. When we know better, why can't we do better?
And that's the heart. That's the heart of unmanageability.
Yeah, because I know I'm not a victim.
Right.
If I'm in emotional distress and emotional pain, the first thing my mind does is want to blame someone else for those feelings.
Absolutely.
I know I'm not responsible. I may have told my sponsor, I wrote it in my 4th step, I'm not responsible, but it's like I have a fallback position.
Yeah.
That's where I go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that? Is it because...
Well, it's human nature. I do believe that. It's the survival instinct that's built into us. I'm making that up now just based on my experience and understanding. But Bill knew it. In the big book, he said, watch for resentment and fear and dishonesty and selfishness. In the 10th step, watch for when they crop up. He didn't say if. When they crop up, meaning that we never overcome our humanity. Mm-hmm. On a daily basis, we will have inappropriate and unhealthy reactions to reality because it doesn't meet our expectations. And the truth is, a spiritually awakened person doesn't try to make reality adjust to them, they adjust to reality. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question is self-supporting just that question aimed at financial side, or is it actually the whole lot? Like self-supporting, cooking for yourself and just doing your laundry and stuff like that?
I'm pretty sure that Bill's perspective was financial because that was one of his huge problems during his drinking days. He lost jobs and the ability to work, and he relied on Lois. But I love the creativity of expanding it into all aspects of life. I think that's wonderfully creative on your part and whoever is giving you that kind of perspective to take a look at all the rest of the areas of your life. Yep.
I discussed it with my sponsor and he sort of said the same thing, financial, and then we got into the whole other side, and it works. It works for me anyway. Because when I was inactive, I wasn't exactly self-supporting in any area.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I could see that being very relevant with once you've gained some traction, some time. I do quite a bit of work in emotional sobriety in the last 10, 15 years. And I could see that very specifically. A great question in emotions. Do I have a balance in my emotions? Am I emotionally supporting myself? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, huh?
That's very rich. That's a gift that you've just given me. I can use that with other people.
No problem.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm really enjoying the workshop. Yeah, looking forward to moving on and
Right. Yeah. Enough of the darkness, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all light.
Let's move toward the light. That's right.
That's it.
I agree 100%.
Someone that I love dearly was sharing her, I guess it was really a 10th step with me. And I've noticed that I've been having a very strong reaction to it. So I wanted to put my twist on it. And it was so funny. So my sponsor's listening to me as I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I think she should do. And she's not saying, she said, so you're saying that if she did it your way. And I said, oh my gosh, right? Like you, and then I thought of the actor and that I wanted to be the director of her 10th step. Oh my gosh. And rather than saying to her, which I am going to say to her, this is really hard for me. I'm not sure whether I'm the gal that can do this. But that realization that I wanted to get in there and fix it for me so that I wasn't feeling any pain. I mean, oh my gosh.
There's two insights for you there. Number one, that you're aware of the dynamic of your behavior. But number two, you looked deeper into the motive. It wasn't about them at all. It was about you. Perfect. No, that's just, what a gift. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, this is hard, good stuff.
Yeah.
Hard, good stuff.
We haven't seen it yet, but we will in part of step 2. But on page 14 in Bill's own story, if you remember, we only read the first half of his story. In the second half of his story on page 14, he has this phrase, simple but not easy. It means the destruction of self-centeredness. See, that's harsh. The destruction of self-centeredness.
Yeah. Yes. I hear you. I know it. When I did this will worksheet, I see a little bit of improvement, but there are certain areas, that as Karen was sharing, all of a sudden you're sort of back at the beginning again and you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So.
Right.
And so I'm very task oriented and I'm laser focused. The people involved, the coworkers, are just a shadow, like they're just the background of a picture that you would look at, focused in on a laser, and the rest of it's just a shadow. So as I'm caught up in that, then I'm very unkind, impatient, irrelevant to people around me. So what's happened is suddenly, when I realized and became aware of that laser and my task-oriented, which I have been this way for years and years and years, suddenly that laser turned into an overhead light. And all of a sudden, the people that I work with came into focus. And in that focus, I was able to just pause and live in that surrender of letting go of the laser and actually seeing the people around me. And the kindness that came out was not me. So I wasn't going there. I was being there.
You were delivered there.
Yes. It would. And so the very power, so there's a choice. And this came, the awareness comes then it's our will to make the choice. So I could have seen that, oh, I'm laser focused and these people don't matter. I could have seen that and kept on with the laser.
Yeah.
Or I saw it and I went, okay, I surrender. And the second I did that, the focus totally changed. And with that, I was taken into a way that I've never been.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and that's the definition of a spiritual awakening. I mean, it could have even been an experience depending on whether there was any sort of time awareness of the beginning and the end of it. But just the fact that you're aware of the dynamic of it, what a gift that is. And you never know when it's going to happen, that curtain parting, and you can't make it happen. You can just be,
right.
You know, just show up and do the next indicated thing and be happily surprised when it does happen.
And it's all from this work.
Yes.
This slow, focused, this slow, you keep going back, you keep reading, you keep thinking. And even with all this, you know, I had done every bit of this all the way down to the last 8. And I was getting different things all along the path.
Wow.
But this one, this week, just transformed, not only me, it transformed the people around me. And I just sat back and watched it. It was incredible.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you for this work.
Thank you for the diligence and also now the witness and the sharing of it. Thank you so much.
And I want to run this past you and see if you think it's right or am I way off base. So I'm just going to read it because it's easier for me to say it. And so it goes like, I wrote like this. When my life is unmanageable, you know, when I do what I don't want to do, and it's just my reactions to life, and I experience the bedevilments, and then I get lots of resentments, fears, etc. What I do then, because of this tension, and I can't stand it because I'm an addict, I'm a pleasure-seeking machine, and I just need things easy, and I can't handle it. I turn then to food, to lots of other things, but also codependency behaviors. So I'm seeing codependency behaviors as addiction for me. And because, I mean, there's millions of them, of course. And yeah, so what do you think of that? Like, is it, I'm just trying to get it in. I know you said that codependency is maybe the underbelly of all addictions, but I'm wondering, is it not maybe an addiction itself? Because it's a fix.
I'm pretty confident
it's a fix for my pension.
Yeah, it's a. I do believe it's a standalone addiction. There are 3 programs actually for that. Al-Anon, if the truth were be known and you really looked underneath it, it probably is about codependency, the addiction to the addict.
Yeah.
Adult children of alcoholic, and Codependence Anonymous. That's an area to explore for you. Is it an addiction? Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
And when I asked the question, you know, what's wrong with my body, my mind, and my will? Well, the body, you know, I can't stop. The mind, I can't stay stopped. And the will, my self-will chooses unhealthy actions.
Yes.
Of course, the unhealthy actions is to control. And, you know, with all of these, they kind of flip back and forth from, you know, if I'm in the food, well, yeah, my life's more unmanageable. If I'm in codependency, my life is more unmanageable. So they really kind of meld together, kind of thing. Behavioral descriptions in the will. And then also too, like I just believe in the will part that that's my human condition. That was the way, that's the way I'm made, kind of like, I forget what that singer says, that's the way I'm made, you know?
Yeah, go ahead.
What areas am I living as if I have power? You know, like what causes me to have a lot of unmanageability is I think I'm right. I think, oh, I can help them so much here. They just need this little bit of help and advice. No one's asking. I get myself, no, but you know, and the kids, you know, like it just undermines their sense of self-esteem. These are adult children too. And
right.
Just creates havoc in my life. So I just wanted to say those things about this. It's yeah, I'm really liking all of this stuff and ready to go into two, I guess, because I'm at a bottom, I think.
It's a real refreshing move when we move out of step one to step two. But you made a really important observation, which I don't believe I've made as strongly and as clearly as you just made it there. And you said the problem is with the body and the mind and the will, but it kind of flows in a cycle that it's not just so clean a deal, it's all interactive. No. And I'm so glad that you said that, because it's all us. We are arbitrarily trying to isolate the areas to understand and experience them in a different way. But it's all going on at the same time.
Yeah. Back and forth and mixing the waters up, you know, where you don't know really what the hell you're doing, you know.
See, and that's really an important and a very important observation. I really appreciate your making that.
Thanks. Anyway, great.
Thank you.
I'll just say, first of all, I'm really tired today, just sort of spirit weary, tired. My body's tired. I've worked an incredibly hard day yesterday. It's back to back. It's been very demanding, and there had just been very few minutes in between things. But it hasn't been unmanageable, and it's really interesting because you talked about unmanageability and manageability if you're sober a day or even, and I feel the gift of manageability in a very full, demanding day in which I have had a range of emotions, and ups and downs. I've had responses and reactions, but in the midst of it, there wasn't a time in the day where I, for any length of period, lost a sense of God underneath it, or holding it. And it's just kind of a cool experience to say this, because I think a lot of times I will still read just life happening, life on life's terms, as being unmanageable, and it's like, no, that's just life. And so feels very powerful, actually, and
it's very empowering.
Yes. And it has so much to do, you mentioned last week, the pause. That pause, just taking a moment, I remember being so grateful early on in the program when someone was using that phrase a lot, I'm not responsible for my first thought. And that was very useful to me, because I thought, wow, I have agency, I have choice for that second thought.
Yes.
That's gold to me, because my first thoughts were all follow the impulse out. That's the body, that's the mind. It just felt so natural to me forever to just, I had an impulse for this, follow it 20 miles out, don't make any contemplation about it. And so to be given the gift of even 4 seconds of a pause.
That's right.
So, and now what I'm kind of feeling deeper awareness of in this conversation today, all that unmanageability really is, I know I'm just saying it for myself, you said it 100 beautiful ways, but it's just being out, letting go of that alignment with God, the clarity of it, the claiming of it, when it has to do with that fear, like today's been busy. So in a way that's also protection, because I don't really have time to pick up those fears. But I can imagine that when I'm done with this, I have one more meeting afterwards, and then I could sit on the couch for 15 minutes and allow myself to start picking up the fears, which just feels like the soil of that unmanageability. So I don't know, just thanks for all this, because it's feels great to differentiate that life, and when life is such a, I don't know, shit show out of control right now, just not even my life, but the world. And and I ain't got no control over
unmanageability being experienced in the United States today.
Yes, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Can we come to the workshop,
we have
please?
brush fires here in California. It seems to me like the United States is on fire. Oh my God. Yeah.
It does. Yes. No, and I can attach to that, of course, too, like, and it's my unmanageability all of a sudden if I allow that fear to come up. But
Right.
so, yeah, I too appreciate just your conciseness. You're driving these messages home. There was something about the value of just today not focusing on the addiction, which gave me that freedom, and then also to just, yeah, just had two thoughts that converged. Sorry. There's a lot bubbling. It's good. I guess that's enough, but I wanted to share that report and the space that you opened up by just saying, let's not focus on the addiction, because there's a way in which I can forget the manageability that I have and the power that's available all the time. I can forget because there's that mindset to be a good person in recovery means I'm kind of always focusing on what I'm missing and what's the next character defect I haven't found and what's, and even just the way I breathe. Am I doing that addictively? Maybe I took too much air in, and there's a way that it could start to be just its own sick little, I can allow myself to be strong and healthy and be in the power, kind of claiming it more deeply, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and I'm grateful.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing with us.
I know from these periods of abstinence that the unmanageability is usually what drives me back into my addiction.
That's a great insight. You want to talk about that a little bit? What your experience is with that?
Yes. I can let if I don't exercise my will, which is to relying on the 12 steps, essentially relying on this program and the 12 steps and my higher power, I can actually go crazy even before I'm in the food. I can obsess about food. I can obsess about anything. My mind is this really powerful tool that I feel like I need to have the 12 steps as like my little blinders, the way a racehorse might have blinders on. And with those blinders, I can win the race. But if you take them off and I start looking around, it's, that's where my mind can go crazy. And then oftentimes it leads me to make bad decisions. Even while I'm abstinent, I can make bad decisions.
Oh, yeah.
If I, basically what happens if I get too full of myself. Yeah. I've done this over and over. Oh, I'm abstinent for 2 years. I can now do this thing. I can leave my program and go to something with less structure, or I can just leave program altogether. I can do all the things that everyone told me you can't do, those will lead you back into your addiction. And I'm like, well, I don't want to go back into my addiction. So why would these lead me back into my addiction if I don't want to go back into my addiction? But time and again, they do, because I suddenly think I can handle it. I can handle it. No. And I could talk about putting myself in a really difficult situation, but mainly just trying to live my life on my own willpower, trying to not have a program or have a program that I've designed, which means it's really not a program where it changes every day. Changing, really playing with my food plan. For me, that is the crux of managing my food addiction, is letting my sponsor and my program give me my food plan, and I can talk to my sponsor about it. I can, doesn't mean it's never ever gonna be changed, but I don't get to just change it whenever I want to, because then my mind is constantly thinking about it. But
right.
So I know without any hesitation or any doubt that even when I'm abstinent, the unmanageability is part of my disease. And I don't know how non-addicts deal with unmanageability, or maybe they don't have as much of it, but I can go crazy. I can literally go crazy, and it creates this mental, I want to say pain. It's not just pain. It really creates a lot of anxiety, because if I've spent too much money, or if I've done something I know I shouldn't do, or if I've started to think about food too much, I start to get so much anxiety. And then the anxiety just riddles me with, I can't sleep. And I start thinking, okay, if I change my food plan, that'll make it better. If I change my food plan, that'll make it better. Or if I could only eat this one thing, that'll make it better. And I'm constantly chasing the high and chasing the food. And then I'm where you described so well, where the thought becomes the obsession. And my mind tells me the only thing that will fix it is this food, this thing, this food thing.
Right.
Or this amount of food. It's not just a food thing, but it's lots of food things.
Right. No, I get it. No, it's a wonderful, you've really teased it out wonderfully in giving us a detailed description. Bill Wilson uses the term to capture the word that you used about pain. You were looking for the right word. In step 10, he uses the word disturbed.
Yes.
When I'm disturbed, right?
Yes.
Dr. Thibault, the psychiatrist that worked with him, you talked about the ego. He said, Bill got it right. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth, but the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself.
Oh, yes.
And that's what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing to do with your addiction, everything to do with your living your life.
Yes.
And we can get compulsive about anything. And Craig was talking about getting, hooked into some type of a compulsion that isn't necessarily connected with your addiction at all, but is sort of your unhealthy relationship to some reality. And to go back to where you started with, and you talked about the mind out of control. I love, especially in light of the relevancy of the image of fire, at least, here in California and Oregon and Washington, it's been devastating out of control this year. And so in the hill fires the mountain fires the forest fires that we've been having, it's kind of like, it's devastating, and that's fire that's out of control. But I put on my fireplace, and that's wonderful. And I put on my stove or my coffee pot, and that's all wonderful use of fire and energy that way. So the difference between a mind that's unhealthy and a mind that's healthy is the containment.
Yes.
The conscious containment of the way my mind works. And that's why I love Bill's use of the word meditation. Upon awakening, we ask God to direct our thinking.
Yes.
To put it in a container, a channel.
Right. I need the containment, but it's channeling it. I love to channel it, because when it's channeled properly, I have so much energy and I get so much done.
There he is. And if a lot of people are hearing that and they're going, oh, gee, that's not my experience, that kind of energy that you're talking about. And so she's relating her experience and her dynamic. Just relate to what you can identify with, not all of the kind of energy. Each of us has our own level of energy, both physical and mental and emotional. So yeah, and you found a way to channel your energy, to put it in a container.
Yes. Thanks, Herb.
You bet.
I can agree, and I know that it's right to turn my will and my life over to God. But I have a tiny voice in the back of my head that always says, yes, but remember, he made a mistake at one time in your life. Mm-hmm. And it always nags at me, and I can't. It comes up from time to time, and it's like, I'm doing my best to surrender, but I always have that but.
Yeah. All right.
So that's
this is a wonderful consciousness on your part. Do you have a big book in front of you?
I do.
Could you turn to page 59, please?
I'm right here. I have it marked. Correct.
All right. And would you read step 3, the first half of step 3 for us, please?
Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God.
Stop. Would you read it again, please?
Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God.
Stop. All right. So what does it say differently than the way you started out?
It doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Made it.
Critically
Oh,
different.
I'm not making a decision.
No, 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 that's not the critical. You said turn your will over to God.
And our lives.
No, 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 you're missing my point.
Yes, I am.
It says to turn our will and our life over to the care of God, not to God.
Over to the care of God.
Do you think that's a significant difference?
I always thought it was over to God.
I know,
Yes.
because that's what you said, and that's why I picked up on it.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. It's hugely different.
yes, it is.
God doesn't want your will, and God doesn't want your life. Sorry, honey. He gave it to you. It's yours now.
I thought he did.
I know. That's what you said. That's why I'm picking up on it. We're not at step 3, but we're preparing for it.
Oh,
And you use the term surrender. Do you know that term is not in the big book?
it isn't?
Nope. Nowhere. In the first 164 pages is that word used.
All this time I've been praying for you to surrender.
I know. You hear it in meetings, and I used it many, many years with regard to step 3. It's a relevant term for step 1, where you are completely defeated and you surrender, yes, but not step 3. Step 3 is not passive.
Made the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God.
Yeah, and we'll talk much more about it when we get there, but I wanted to sort of set up a yellow flag here for you and everybody else to kind of like challenge the way we think about things and the words we use, because they're critically important.
I knew I was off on my thinking, but I didn't know what it was.
Well, but that wasn't necessarily the point that you were going to make, and I've used it as a point. So can you go back to what you were coming on, what you were trying to...
Yes, and let me go back here. So then when I read 60 and 61, I underlined, I underlined being the actor who wants to run the whole show.
Sure.
So after I have some sobriety, I think to myself, well, then I better get going, get my life, now that I can see clearly, put it in order.
Yeah, and that's a very good goal, healthy goal, yes.
But I mean, what I do is I take back the reins.
Maybe you do it, maybe you don't. What you said is that you're not going to turn over your will and your life to the care of God because you had some unfortunate incident in your early sometime life. And that has given you some pause about this. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, we're going to take a deep look at what you believe in step 2 over the next month as we look at steps 2 and 3. So it's good that you're aware of that, and just make sure that you have notes on that and do these assignments and see what your experience is going to be as we go through the process.
Because I know I don't want to be the actor or the director. I don't want those roles. I'm tired of them. But I also don't want to have a big mistake in my life again. I want to be.
That's right.
I want to continue to be hyper vigilant with everything, with my life.
Okay. Now you're using another term, and I'd just like to know what you mean by it when you say hyper vigilant. What does that mean for you?
Just not having any surprise tragedies or
Is that kind of unrealistic?
I know it is, but I just feel like I should be on the watch for
Well, is that going to change anything? Or is your paying attention to the world around you going to change anything?
maybe, I don't know. But I
Okay.
think I should be on watch.
Okay. All right. It's your life. Yeah. You get to live it the way you want. But
Okay.
that's the Serenity Prayer, isn't it? What can I influence and what can't I influence?
Yes. I say
Good.
it every day, twice a day.
Yeah. Well, it's just stay open with regard to what we're entering into now, a very, very, very new experience with steps 2 and 3 together. And you'll see how they are very organically connected. Step 2 is a decision about what God is. And step 3 is a decision to have a relationship with whatever you determine it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll have a wonderful experience with it, Jean. Thank you. Anything else?
No, that is it. Herb, thank you.
When I joined 5 years ago, and I still consider myself quite new, that question of unmanageability went right over my head.
Yeah.
I said, oh, okay, I'm fat and I got a problem, and I can admit that I am an addict, easy, but unmanageable. I don't do any of those things. Remember, we've talked about this, the bedevilments.
Yep.
I acted like a real fool. But in answering the will, I find that my biggest problem, because I really do get along with people pretty well, as long as they give me my way. No, seriously, I do. And I don't think it's just people pleasing. I really like to be congenial. But when I don't get my way, I get very emotional, not when I don't get my way, but when I get frustrated over technology, trying to get through to somebody,
Sure.
I'm telling you, I almost blow up a gasket. I'm afraid my blood pressure is dangerous. It happened yesterday. I am so impatient. And yes, abstinence does help with the unmanageability, because I am for 30 days by the grace of God. But most of these, I didn't have too hard of a time with it. But I guess patience is the biggest problem that I have.
That's a wonderful insight on your part to and to relate it to everybody else, because that's a very human condition. I mean, the person in front of you fumbling with their check account in the bank, or the person on the freeway going too slow, or the people behind you going too fast, and all. I mean, yeah. And when we react to that, as somebody said earlier, that's unmanageability.
It is.
Yeah, we think the world and people should be a certain way, and regularly they disappoint us.
Well, I know it's a virtue, and I know there's, been many people in history that have worked on it, but it's helped me a little bit when I read Letting Go by Dr. Rubin something or other. When those things come up, or when bad feelings come up, if I reason to myself, how is this doing me any good? I can actually let it go, and it calms me down. It's like the pause.
Yes, it is the pause. Yes.
It does settle me down and say, I'm not going to remember this in 2 minutes. Why get upset? Because you are a good example. You are about the most calmest person I've ever met.
Okay. It wasn't always so. So that's a high compliment. So thank you so much.
Just right off the bat, personal relationships. They have baffled me always, not even gender specific, but I just look, I'm convinced.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your experience in looking back on your history with this bedevilment of relationships.
I think I've made myself unavailable, but I've twisted it to where I've blamed others, or I keep myself so busy.
Both of those will do that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Blaming others puts you in a victim stance so that you don't have to look at yourself, and staying so busy is a narcotic, so you don't have to look at yourself. Yep. Yep.
And fear, I kind of breezed by at first, and I thought, you know, I'm not, no, I don't have fear. I was like, oh, wait, bucko, back up. It's like, I can seem really calm, but I'm stuffing it somewhere. And with everything going on externally, way out of my reach of influence.
Right.
But I had the reality of, like, I can't control, little bit that I can control is just showing up in the morning and doing what I'm supposed to be doing and all of that. And I picture, I was sharing this in my group, my study group. It's like the requirements for life require like a 50-gallon drum of water if it's to put out a fire or something. And my portion that I have is just about a quarter cup. And so where am I going to invest that for the best return? And I can't put it directly on the fires because it won't go anywhere. There's not enough in my little quarter cup. And so investing it into the 50-gallon drum, higher power.
Yeah.
And then it goes where it needs to go.
You know, that's a wonderful image that you're giving me. And that is, I have a cup. It's not much, but it's all I got.
That's exactly.
You know, no, but there's humility in that. How can I be most effective with that cup? A wonderful consciousness. And what you said was, if I pour my cup into other people's cup, we'll have a 20-gallon tank, and that will be effective. And what you're talking about is the connection to community. No, I love the image.
And I don't. The 50-gallon drum I'm thinking about is my higher power. It's like the other.
Okay. You went to that level, yeah, and that's.
But I like where you went.
I went to the other, but it's still turning to other, and you know, God probably is an infinite tank and not a 50-gallon. But then the community tank, and so that covers both sides of it, and therefore we have a channel of influence and grace and life and support. I like it very much. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.
Regarding unmanageability, two things I wanted to talk about is that I would describe myself as an emotional drunk. I have a lot of emotions, and I love my emotions. You know, I do understand them strangling me. But the unmanageability, and I'm so attracted by the not wanting to be a puppet to other people. But having grown up in my family, I feel like I came out with a hypervigilance with people. And I pay such attention to how much eye contact I get, voice tone, your posture. I would know, if I could see you, I would know what you were doing with your foot. If your right leg was crossed over your left, I would know your posture. I would know everything about you. I have been so hyper vigilant, and that comes from a lot of abuse of a family growing up, that an overdevelopment of that. And I feel like it drains a tremendous amount of energy from me, and I really don't know how to manage it. It does make my life unmanageable. I mean, I've even paid attention to your comments, you know, how you phrase your comments, and some seem more adoring than to others. And I haven't quite gotten to the adoring level, you know, and and so everything, the antenna are just out for everything. And then I have all the emotions, and how I'm supposed to manage this on a daily basis. I have to take 2-hour naps, you know, since you cut my calories, and I am now on the 50th day of abstinence. I couldn't even string 3 together for 6 years, and this is just like a miracle. I don't even know where it's coming from. You can call it grace. You can call it my sponsor that I talk to 5 days a week, that because she gets out of bed and talks to me, I don't want to disappoint her. I have major codependency. I feel like I need a prefrontal lobotomy to take care of all these things that you've addressed with the powerlessness and the unmanageability. So that's item number 1, is my hypervigilance and my emotional drunkenness, and going through the world with that, you know?
I do, and it's a huge issue. It really is a big issue. AA actually wrote a pamphlet on the dry drunk syndrome.
Yes.
And it isn't exactly connected to what you were just talking about, what that pamphlet is talking about. So I'm starting at sort of the base level. What that pamphlet is talking about is people who get abstinent from alcohol and then go to meetings and keep the plug in the jug, but don't do anything else. And, you know, your soul will dry up if you don't do meditation and if you don't help other people. And I believe when that happens, then you become angry and fear-filled and all kinds of dysfunctionality from a human standpoint. That's the dry drunk syndrome. What you're really talking about is managing emotions in a conscious way rather than having them manage you in an unconscious way, or even conscious, quite frankly. Bill Wilson wrote a letter in response to somebody's query back in the mid-50s concerning emotional sobriety, and Bill wrote a response back that was published in the Grapevine concerning his own personal experience. And when you read it, 1958, it's called Emotional Sobriety, the Next Frontier. He does everything but use the word codependency. In 1958, that word hadn't yet been invented. It was probably invented. I don't think Melody Beattie invented it, but her first book made it very nationally prominent, Codependent No More, in the early 80s. And what I've learned is that emotions are a normal part of the human behavior as a survival instinct at the basic level and a method of dealing with reality at the best level, where there's signals for danger and there are also signals and thermostats to tell us when we're suffering and or experiencing joy. So emotions are incredibly important to a human being's avoiding pain and increasing their happiness. The problem with an addict is that we have, through all kinds of circumstances, created very unhealthy habits and patterns of behavior at immediate gratification and allowing our emotions to manage us. That's my experience with steps 1 through 9, that it takes us into a place of consciousness in steps 4 through 9, especially, where we're able now to identify those instincts and those emotions and to manage them with our mind and our will. That was a lot, and it's one of my favorite subjects, and it's such an important question because I think it's today in our culture what's really lacking. Most everybody seems to be driven by their emotions rather than by their functioning intellect or mind, where they're actually processing in a reasonable way and a balanced way, and then taking actions based on principles rather than gratification. Am I giving a big picture to what you're saying, or am I missing the mark?
Well, what I'm hearing is that there's a just right balance between the cortex and emotions, and
it's a balance, as you say, which is like a process and a dynamic that we need to be conscious of every day. Bill gave us the 10th step, and in the 12 and 12 he says it's a spiritual axiom: whenever we're disturbed, there's something wrong with us. When these things pop up, he says in step 10 in the big book, resentment, fear, dishonesty, and selfishness, when they crop up, not if, then we, with our mind and our will, we do these things.
Well, you know, it's really refabricating a whole new structure to the things I've learned, the things I've practiced, the habits,
yes,
the
ma'am.
Principles, the
yes,
way I want to live.
A reconstruction. That is exactly right. Yes.
That. So I look forward to a better balance, because it just really is exhausting. And to have to monitor people. I mean, my mother used to monitor people's eye contact, and if they didn't give enough to her, she would curl her teeth and curl her lips and show her teeth, and she wouldn't come to Thanksgiving if they were there. I mean, it was that bad. And so,
well, that takes into another direction, that hypervigilance, and you connected it, I think, appropriately with a dysfunctional environment in growing up, whether that's addiction, alcohol, or just plain dysfunction from some other form of trauma-producing event like disability or death or abandonment or mental illness or physical illness. The outcome is the same. The children become very hypersensitive, very hypervigilant to that environment of dysfunction.
My parents and my brother were all in and out of closed psychiatric wards. There was alcoholism, there was prescription drug abuse, there was violence, you name it.
Well, no wonder you married a man that was very cerebral.
Yeah, he was very structured and financially secure, and all the chaos that I came from, he looked very attractive, and now I hate him because he's all of that, and wants rules and structure. And anyway, it is an ongoing, but it's very, very, very encouraging and hopeful to be aware of it and to appreciate that, it does put a hole in my gas tank for during the day, to have to be so vigilant about people's voice tone.
But you don't have to be.
No, I know, but I don't know how not to be. I mean,
well, that's what you need to learn, is how to properly and in a healthy way discern danger and distinguish that from safety, and have a lot more confidence in your own ability to navigate between the two.
Yeah. It'd be nice to know what somebody else's brain was like without.
No, it's not necessary. No, and first of all, because it's not important. It would be nice in that sense, but it's not realistic, is it? So deal with it. That's not going to happen. So you need to just be able to, Dr. Berger says, we keep our center of gravity deep in ourself. We don't place any power in people and events and circumstances in the sense of naming us. We keep our center of gravity deep inside ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to red lights and crazy drivers, absolutely. But that hypervigilance is a habit that was learned at one time that served you well. It no longer serves you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
thank you.
Yeah, and the psychologists call it conditioned behavior because we can, in fact, habituize some of our physical and emotional behavior. At the same time, if we want to reverse that, they call it extinguishing. We can reverse the conditioning with repetitive behavior. And that is a behavioral psychologist's job to help you achieve that.
For me, especially in this last relapse, because I'm a little bit conscious of it because it just happened, it's that little kid in me that just feels like the weekend's not going to be fun. Here's how we can make it fun. And the adult just goes along like right out of the big book. I mean, right out of the big book. And I am somebody that comes from a lot of trauma, a lot of insanity with my parents. And I think it's kind of flipped around. I started working so young, and now I don't want to work. I just don't. I have done everything I can to avoid working, and the manageability piece, that like never self-supporting through my own contributions, never any kind of like personal relationships, a mess. This is my third marriage, 3 kids, 3 different fathers, a host of boyfriends and relationships in between, no real friendships, no like steady friendships throughout my life. So my personal relationships are a mess. And I just want to isolate with the food. That's really what I want to do. And so yeah, just a lot of stuff going on. I don't want to I know we've moved on to unmanageability, but I feel like the relapse was very significant.
No, it is. It is. Yeah. And the reason that unmanageability is so significant is that it creates relapse if it's not treated. So your connection is perfect. Mm-hmm. This is exactly why unmanageability is so important. And Bill says in step 10 on page 85, we're not cured of that. Right. So if we don't deal with it effectively, we will relapse.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, so you're just giving us a living model right here as we speak of the truth of what the big book says.
Yeah.
And so what you need to do is, and you may need therapy, but that's not my area of expertise, and I'm not even suggesting it right now. I don't want to dismiss it, but I'm not going to include it as part of our conversation. But what I am going to say is, Bill says, we relapse because we're not in fit spiritual condition. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to say that keeping in mind a much bigger perspective. There's lots of other reasons we relapse.
Right.
All right. So, but I can't address those. That's beyond my scope, my ken, if you will. What I can address is that if you do the first 9 steps and finish the 9th step, and then embrace step 10, 11, and 12, inventory when disturbed. Mm-hmm. Those emotional variations in every day that we experience can hijack us.
Yeah.
If we don't manage them.
Right.
And
right.
so our instincts and emotions are really, really, really good, effective survival instincts, unless in fact they're managing us. then it's out of control.
Mm-hmm.
We need to use this and this, I'm saying our head, our mind, our cognition,
Mm-hmm.
and our ability to make decisions based on this cognition. We need to use those two things and improve them on a daily basis in order to manage the instincts and the emotions. Now, if you're in early recovery, then perhaps relapse is going to be part of your story until, in fact, you get some traction with the steps and finish the 9th step. But
Mm-hmm.
after you finish the 9th step, quite frankly, from a step process, from a recovery standpoint, there's no reason for relapse.
Yeah.
Once you finish the first 9 steps, if you do step 10, spot check inventory when you're disturbed, if you do morning meditation to get guidance and power, and if you live your life consciously on principles, especially helping other people on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
you won't relapse. Oh
Yeah.
my God, what an order. That's what the book says, doesn't it? What
Yeah.
an order. I
Yeah.
can't go through with that. Well,
Right.
you're at the fork in the road. You can choose the easy path of complacency and relapse and eventually death, or you can choose the hard road of self-denial and application and doing some hard suffering and work, soul surgery, but in the long term, have a life that flourishes.
Mm.
You're in a food program, I'm taking it.
Yeah. Now I'm in a food program. Yeah.
How long you been in a food program?
Same thing, on and off for 15 years. But most recently, when I relapsed this time, I had 20 days.
Okay, but that's a real newcomer, though.
Yeah.
So
The longest I ever had in this food program was 100 days, and that was 8 years ago.
Okay.
And then it's been constant 30 out there, and it just, when you say like, why was I shaky? It's like, I feel like it doesn't feel.
You just answered my question, why you're shaky.
Yeah, because I'm new. I'm always new.
You're new because you're a perennial newcomer.
Perennial newcomer.
Then it's a different question. Why are you a perennial newcomer? I mean,
I think I'm still in denial. I think there's a part of me that is still in denial about, and especially with the food. I think, well, I've got a problem with food, but is it really this? So do I really have to do this program? You know what I mean? That's the hard thing. And my brain searches, even when I'm doing well.
It's not a hard thing. No,
yeah.
Don't accept it. I don't accept it. You're a bright and articulate and energetic and healthy young woman. I can see it. All right. I can hear it. All right. We learned that we had to, page 30, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we are an addict. This is the first step in recovery, fully concede. Here's the part that I really wanted you to hear, though. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about denial, and that's an equivalent synonym for a delusion.
Yep. I'll admit that 100%.
Right.
It is a delusion.
So, do you have a sponsor?
Yes.
In the food program?
Yes.
All right. Which program are you in, by the way?
CEA How.
That's a good one. Okay. I mean, they're all good to some extent, but that's the Green Berets of food disorder. They're rigorous as long as you're with somebody who has common sense and is not just rigid.
Yeah, no, she's very, I don't want to say she's flexible, but she's reasonable.
I don't mean flexible. I didn't say that.
Yeah, she's reasonable.
I said common sense. Reasonable.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
good. All right.
She's reasonable, yeah.
All right. So have you ever done the steps 1 through 9?
Not in the food program, no.
Let me ask the question. Have you ever done the steps 1 through 9?
Yes. In
what
AA, I did.
In what?
in AA.
Are you also an alcoholic?
I don't think so.
Oh, so why were you in AA?
Well, I liked that program better, and I thought.
Not my question. Well, maybe that is the answer. Okay. I like that okay, so why did you like that program better?
This is going to sound really bad, but at that time in my life, I was single, and there were more boys, and it was more social, and we would go out and party.
So it wasn't about an addiction. It was about a social mechanism rather than using dates.com. You used AA.com.
Yeah.
Right? No, that's cool. I get it. Why not? There's a lot of men that do that, quite frankly. But anyway, they're not very well, by the way. But
no.
But going back to it, did you do the steps out of the big book?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do a 4th and 5th step complete?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very thorough. Yeah, very thorough.
And did you do a 9th step and finish it?
I did.
You finished your 9th step.
Finished it. Yeah.
Did you have a spiritual awakening?
I felt like I did. Yeah, I felt
how
like
would you know? Wait, how would you know that you had a spiritual awakening?
I'm not the same person as I was before I did those steps.
That's it right there. All right.
Yeah.
So then did you continue doing 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis?
No.
Oh.
That's there's what do they talk about, the link in the chain or the kink in the chain? That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and stuff built up because I have a very active mind, and I also think I get my feelings hurt very easily, and I think
because you're self-centered.
I'm very self-centered. Yeah. Yes, it's all about me, and and I started to really just really stuff was building up, and I wasn't addressing it, and I think the food was helping me numb out.
Food or work or exercise or pornography, or you pick it, it'll pop up because we cannot handle the tension that builds.
No.
From life. That's unmanageability.
Yeah.
All right. So you're in a 12-step program. You have a sponsor, and is she supportive of you doing the work of the steps through this workshop?
Yep, she's very fascinated by it. She's very it sounds great.
Right.
She thinks, get help wherever you can.
Well, and so, especially with the prior experience of finishing the steps, reconnect to and recommit to a daily practice of 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
While you're doing this work. That's why I start out the workshop that way.
Okay.
You've got a particularly helpful history because you've done the work of the steps, so you've got that behind you as an ability to have a much better hold on 10, 11, and 12. And if you don't really understand them as well because you need a refresher, you might want to go and listen to my 10, 11, and 12 on my website just to refresh you, or read my second book, 12 Steps to Spiritual Awakening, in 10, 11, and 12, and really dig in on those while you're doing this other work. It's kind of a double duty right now, but you'll get some traction to be able to maximize the probability of not relapsing.
Right. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I really want. Yeah. It's painful to be sort of like half awakened and then half killing yourself with food. It's just a brutal place to be, to know better. What do they say? Head full of program and belly full of food. It's just, So, okay, I can do that.
I think you not only can do it, but you can begin to have a very measurable new experience if you do it.
Okay.
Not because, well, anyway, so are you familiar with the OA Vision for You call? Yeah. You might connect to that also if in fact you have some additional time to be listening or participating in a telephone meeting. They have like 3 a day or something like that, 7 days a week, but I'm very impressed with their connection to the book and the steps, and they are an eating disorder group.
Yeah.
All right, so, all right. You can work all that out with your sponsor. I've enjoyed the conversation. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Herb.
So I guess I just wanted to share a few examples of this unmanageability. And I was trying to identify some ways where the unmanageability occurs kind of in seemingly small ways, like on a daily basis.
Sure.
That I think can turn into really big problems. So a couple examples are, I'll be feeling really good about completing tasks and making progress on my projects at work and having success, that I get completely lost in the story of that success and the story of how good I'm doing, that I lose touch with the present moment and I end up making a mistake.
Of course.
Messing something up. And then that starts this cycle of feeling horrible about myself and needing to escape and I work for myself. So I have this ability, this luxury to just kind of like leave work whenever, if something doesn't go well. And then it just can lead to this whole trajectory of unmanageability.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And another one.
Cycle, isn't it?
What's that?
That's a vicious cycle.
Yes. And the other one that I think is the most common is I'll be feeling fairly connected with the world, and I'll become aware of that feeling of connection, and I'll want to bring that into a conversation with another person or a group of people. And then in the course of that conversation, what overtakes my thoughts is this fear that I'm being judged or that I'm not accepted or that I said something wrong. I guess it's just kind of a social anxiety thing based fear, I guess, really. But then it just becomes this super powerful thing that totally destroys this feeling of connection I've had, and then totally alters the trajectory of my day. Yep. And at the kind of peak of the unmanageability for me, I've realized, like, these things that seem so small can just take me down this. They can really be the beginning of this huge spiral.
Yeah.
And I connected it though with, man, I was making all kinds of connections last night with this idea of the pause.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, just like the hot stove, I have to like experience everything myself multiple times to really know it. And the pause, and that, I guess, like the choice that exists in the pause is something that's given me it's hard to, just like a whole new sense of power the past couple of weeks. Because I was on this thing with unmanageability. I've been struggling with it the whole time. It's like, well, basically like, oh, well, I'm just a kind of a leaf in the wind who's just shit out of luck, basically. I'm just floating around, a victim to my addiction.
Yeah.
And that's not really the case at all. That's not
correct.
It's kind of amazing. These pauses have, a couple of times have been like really amazing. Like, it's just a few seconds, but I'm aware of this turning point.
Yeah.
A couple times, very literally, in my vehicle, in a literal turning point. But in a couple times, there's been this flow of like, not really complete thoughts, but like, I'll remember like my younger self and how I had these immense fears about something kind of unnamed, and I'll feel this sense of compassion for my younger self. Not in like it's hard to explain. It's just in like a fleeting way. Like, I don't know how to, it's like this, I don't know. It's in that one, in this, the pause, this pause has just been this really amazing thing. That it's like where all these things seem to exist at one time. And then from that point, I can choose to go with God's will and stay sober, basically.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm starting a little kind of ramble a little bit. So.
No. What you're doing is you're holding the experience and looking at it, trying to explain it, and therefore you use similar words, but it's very difficult to explain the unexperienced because it's not knowledge, it's not a feeling, it's an experience. There's an awareness there. So you're just doing a great job in just kind of like leaning into it. And that's, quite frankly, emotional sobriety as a result. And that is the conscious awareness of the impact of a pause, and that it is empowering. And the more you do that, experimentally practicing it, the better you will become and the more effective that you'll become in both the pause and the outcome of the pause. So, yeah, so just lean into it as you'll hear me say monotonously over time. We lean into these experiences, not trying to grasp it and recreate it, because that will just ruin it. That'll just chase it away. But we lean into it to just embrace it and experience it at the deepest level that we can right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has been interesting. This part of the workshop has been really powerful. And I'll tell you what, like, turned around was that worksheet on the will. Yes. Because, I've been thinking I had a pretty good recovery going. I'm in recovery, all of this. And that, I tell you what, that worksheet showed me was how dishonest, not trying to be, how much I don't know. Because I would have gone into that. I did go into that thinking, oh, bedevilments. Yeah, I only struggle with one or two of those now. And I got to tell you, with each one, as I went to write them down, I thought of ways, it just came out. Like, am I having trouble with personal relationships? I couldn't name one right now that I am, but what came out was, yes, I feel awkward, judgmental, like I don't belong or fit in anywhere. Like, that is a bedevilment. That's my will. My ego, all of that. And it came out with all of these. Like, I didn't answer, positive to any. Anyway, what that got me started on was the real unmanageability. It showed me where I'm really at, not where I want, not my fantasy world of what I think, right? So, so talk about brokenness, like to start to see that in a different light. So I think one of the things that's happening for me is this like increased level of honesty and seeing reality, and I feel, but I guess that feels really, I'm feeling that connection more in a sense. I don't know. I kind of lost what I was thinking around that, but this week I had to put one of my dogs down, and which is just is what it is, and I was walking and just before I did it and just trying to figure out, is this the right thing? When you have to make that decision. And I could hear a small voice, and this is coming from someone, with my only conception when I asked, what do I believe that nothing happens by mistake. That's my whole definition of God. Mm-hmm. But I'm walking and I hear this small voice just say, his body is dying. Mm-hmm. Like, it was so clear what to do. Like,
Yeah, when we get really quiet and we ask a question gently and we are patient, there'll be some type of inclination, intuition, inspiration. It's hard to get a word to capture what it is, but there's a knowing, like you had, of the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like the truth is coming, and that's how my experience is going. It's just coming to me. And So a lot of things, but when you said, so how do you behave? This is going to be an interesting week, because if my belief is that nothing happens by mistake, oh yeah, then why am I judging everything around me, as not going right? So yeah, more to come, right?
Well, classically, in the context of a conversation that I have regularly with people, because it's the bullseye center of my spiritual conversations, if we can get to that with somebody, is about meditation. And everybody believes that meditation is helpful. Everybody believes that it's step 11. Everybody believes that human beings are better off when they meditate. And then I say, and do you meditate? Yeah, no, I don't have time. And so you see the difference between belief and behavior is the litmus test of authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when you said it a couple of weeks ago about what do your feet say? They won't lie. That really stuck with me, because it is. I have to look at that.
That was a development that came out of that question answer kind of set aside whole attitude. It wasn't given all at once, and that captures it, doesn't it? Is like, how do your feet move? Because it's objective.
Yeah.
Your feet do not need an explanation. You're either exercising or you're not. You're either robbing banks or you're not. You're either meditating or you're not. It's very objective. It's not subject to interpretation. Your feet tell you the truth.
Yeah. But that messes with my fantasy of what I want to believe about my life, my relationships, my work, anything.
Yeah. But that's how you started out your conversation. You were saying you're coming to a new level of honesty, and that reinforces my image that I try to impart to everybody to incorporate, and that is about the dimmer switch. You see, the lights are getting brighter, so you're beginning to see more. Or in a different metaphor, there's multi-layers of curtains and the light is blocked. But as you pull back each set of curtains, more light kind of penetrates through the other curtains. And that's what this process is. It's awakening up, where we're able to have the darkness dissipate and the light improve so that we can see more.
That's going to take some trust, because it feels very scary to me. Like, it doesn't feel safe to turn up the lights. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to leave it low. That's just my MO. So I just want,
So that really does challenge everything. There's nothing happens by mistake.
Right.
If you believe that, you wouldn't mind intense light.
Right.
Woo.
It's quite the experience.
Exactly.
Well, I'm appreciative for it. It's time for me. I want this. So.
Yeah, well, you obviously do. You're showing up and you're sharing an experience. So, as I say, buckle up, shoulder straps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My sponsor said to me, and I heard it in a meeting this week as well, the journey from your head to your heart. And that's what's coming up for me when I try and wrap my head around this. I can't wrap my head around this. My brain, God, my logic, my reason, my intellectualizing, I can't wrap my head around it. I talk it, I feel it, and when I feel it, it feels incredible. I'm self-conscious about it. I think that people might think I'm crazy. I think maybe I think I'm crazy to believe.
I see. Mm-hmm.
I had an experience about a year ago. My dad was very sick. He needed a liver transplant, and he was going downhill pretty quickly. And it's probably my biggest spiritual experience while being in recovery, God said to me, and I already am judging myself that I sound crazy saying that God said to me that he had him, whatever that meant. It wasn't that I was going to get what I wanted.
Yeah.
I did get what I wanted. But I was just having this quiet time alone. And that's what was loud and clear.
Yeah.
Was that I have him. So this is my heart that goes, whew, and I get relief. And there's a big, it's like you recommended a book, or you were just talking about a book a while ago called Mindsight. I live in my left brain. It's concrete. I can make sense of it. You know, in my right brain, which is my heart and my emotions, I don't know what to do. So, but when I'm there, I love it.
Yeah. Normally, that's a conversation I have with men. So that's interesting. Yeah. Well, of course. Normally, I'm assuming that all women are connected to their emotions and their intuitions in a very healthy way. And what you're saying is, yeah, maybe not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with them.
But what I liked about the way you started is saying that you knew what you wanted, but you were open. And when you heard the voice, you didn't conclude that you were going to get what you wanted, that you were just going to trust whatever you were going to trust. Whatever that was, you were in a place of okayness with that. And,
right.
And I think that's the really healthy spirituality. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's slippery for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, meaning what?
That I cannot wrap my brain around it, and I wonder if I just stop trying to.
Well, let's take a look at it, because you're right at the heart of the matter here. All right. What do you understand by the two words finite and infinite?
What do I understand by those two words?
Yeah.
Finite is over, end, and infinite is forever.
Yeah. Limited and unlimited. And so we don't know what God, the reality, really is, but our logic says that it's unlimited. It didn't have any beginning. It didn't have any end. It's always been. We cannot comprehend that statement. We can make it. We can even understand. I mean, you just understood what I just said, except
right.
that we don't really understand what we just said.
No, my brain hurts. My brain hurts.
Because here's the punchline. Any God that I can understand isn't God.
Right.
Because my mind cannot comprehend, because it's finite, the infinite. I cannot put the ocean in my bucket. My bucket's too small. That's why I love that image.
That helps. That helps. Like, just stop. Just stop trying to figure.
Well, here it is. Just stop trying to figure it out, but don't ever stop trying to be present to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right?
Exactly.
And so, again, my image is I gently lean into the spirit. I have no idea what that means or what it is, other than I trust it and I go with the flow more often than not, and more consciously more often than not today, you know. So, but it's this gentle kind of like, and I've adopted just recently in the last couple of years the word flow. F-L-O-W. There's a flow, and I have a capital F flow. I'm in it. I am not it, but I'm in it. And somebody said nothing happens by mistake. I believe that, not in the sense that there's a plan. I don't believe that for a minute.
Right.
But in the sense that reality is essentially good and it's evolving. Yeah.
I love it.
Well,
Yeah.
there's going to be lots more conversation like this in this whole conversation about steps 2 and 3. And some of it steps outside of the vocabulary of the big book. And, Bill said in 1939, we know only a little, but he knew quite a bit. And he takes us through a process that really opens us up to that spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things. Think about that one. The spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things. The very animating force, life force of all life, the underlying soul of my soul is this animating force. Yeah, that's something to lean into.
Last week I think you said that we have a daily reprieve, and most people think it's from our addiction, but it's really from our spiritual malady. And that just hit me so hard. Several years ago, I had a sponsor who said, you say you believe in God, but you don't believe God. And so I've been really working on that, and just having that religiousness just yanked out of me. And I'm grateful. But to the point where I didn't even know, I'm like, well, what does it even mean to be spiritual anymore? So the only thing I got when I did this was, well, God is huge, and he has all power, all wisdom, and all love. And I've seen his power, but I'm working, I'm looking for the love. Like I have friends who say I'm a child of God and all that, and I don't relate to that at all.
Yep.
And so I'm still working on that part. But what I also saw just like within the last 24 hours is that I just want to be left alone. My personality is like, if I work hard enough, if I do good enough, maybe then you'll just leave me alone. That my time is like insatiable. I always want more time. And so I don't know how that fits in with God, but I was like, well, I need to see.
Yeah. So you're saying that somehow you don't have the amount of time that you need for yourself?
Reality, I think, is that I do. I'm home right now. I can't work, and yet the days just seem to fly by, and I still don't seem to get enough done. And
what would it look like if you got enough done?
I don't know. That's my whole problem.
Wow. So you're having an experience with unmanageability in terms of time.
For sure.
Yeah. So it might be, and it really helps me and I do it annually now. About 6 years ago, we sold our family home, downsized, paid all our debts off, rented a place. So we had no responsibilities. And oh my God, you talk about freedom. It was wonderful. And it is wonderful. But I took the opportunity to prioritize my activities. And I'd never really done that as rigorously. And so I put down all of my substantive activities, the things that took up my consciousness and my time. And then I prioritized them in an arbitrary way, but classing it from numbers 1 through 5. Number 1 being the bullseye activity that is the sweet spot of my heart that I really want, and which is obviously it might not be obvious, but for me, it's the 12-step work and helping people with it. And then the 2s and the 3s and the 4s and the 5s were all there. And I made a decision in prayer to eliminate anything that wasn't a 1. It took 3 months to detach from good stuff, but it wasn't the heart spot. And so every year I do that now. I literally take out a day and I reprioritize, or I prioritize all my substantive activities 1 through 5, and I eliminate anything that isn't the one. And of course, the one gets tighter as my activity gets more refined.
I feel like there's a fear. There must be a fear underneath that that it goes back to my not being good enough and not being able to do enough.
Well, don't ignore that. Okay. Yeah, because some people stay so busy because it's a way to narcotize themselves, so that they're not feeling their fear of the present moment, or their fear of failure, or their fear of not being of value. Oh my, that's a gift, that awareness that you just expressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Well, wonderful conversation. Well, that concludes another wonderful session with you guys, and thank you. So join me in the Serenity Prayer. Many people have talked about that, navigating reality so that we can handle not just the calm water in the flow, but the white water and the rapids and some of the logs and the rocks. And we learn how to navigate that with dignity. That's what this program is, and that's what the Serenity Prayer is all about. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.